I've lived in this city a long time. Where am I? What is this place? Never had I had any inkling that Baltimore City included a space like Fairfield and Waggoner's Point. Would you like the toxic tour?
It was, the people were nice, but the neighborhood was congested. When I'm saying congested, you would smell the odor from the factories, and it was a very unpleasant odor. They only had one bus to go down to Fairfield and go around, and if you missed that bus, you have to come catch the bus to Curtis Bay. And a lot of buses going back and forth Curtis Bay, but not to Fairfield. The place was unreal for people to be living in, even though it was a project.
The old Fairfield, which was Spinnaker homes, were old military-based types of wooden framed houses with a central sort of like belly stove. And so what I remember is that my older brothers would have to go out and collect wood in order to provide heat for our family. In addition, you had the CXX railroad coming through, and coal that would be dropped from the beds. They would collect those in order to have heat during that section.
So Fairfield was on the east side of the point, and Waggoner's Point was town to the south. And there were 4 houses on the road between the two communities that sat across the street from the FMC plant. And people used to talk about those houses
because everyone who owned a pet in those 4 or 5 houses knew when they got the pet that they would bury the pet covered in tumors. And that happened to every pet that came to that row of houses. But, there was no problem. FMC was very clear there was no problem.
At the turn of the century, the 20th century, to serve as a place for locating noxious facilities, environmental hazards, and other locally unwanted land uses.
America, fighting a global war, calls on its shipbuilders for vessels of every type and description.
It was close to the city, but it wasn't part of the city. So in a lot of ways, anything went. They had jack floods, was a beer garden or something. There's a lot of things going on there that couldn't really happen in the city.
After World War II, they stopped building ships there. The community eventually was then turned over to the African American community, existed for 10 more years until then it was sort of phased out.
I was born in the Fairfield community. And during that time period, the Fairfield community was a segregated community.
The other thing complicating the situation was it was termed to be a place to house unwanted populations in terms of the racial politics of the city, classified with the toxic dumps and the physically unwanted uses, or that the African American community being shoved out of North Baltimore.
Firefighters and ambulance crews from Baltimore City and Anne Arundel County rushed to the Delta Chemical Company in Fairfield around 12:30 this afternoon. As workers unloaded chlorine from a tank car, enough of it spilled to form a potentially deadly vapor cloud. About a dozen people were sent to the hospital after they were overcome by fumes. So many rescuers responded because firefighters didn't know how dangerous the situation was, that any leak of chlorine can be hazardous.
That's why maybe looks like we overreact, but we don't think we do in a case like this.
Workers who were sent to the hospital were given lots of oxygen to help clear their respiratory systems.
EPA, the regional office, came down to talk to the residents about what they should do if one of these incidents happened. And they were honest. They said the only thing you can do is shelter in place. And what that meant was taping the windows quickly and taping underneath the door, and then going into a room where you were safe, supposedly safe, and, waiting it out. Enemy, the chemical plants, because I viewed them that way, cooperated by having several accidents. It was a foreseeable event that was not prevented.
Later, when I had moved from Fairfield to the Cherry Hill Public Housing section, we learned that there had been things like a spill from CSX where liquid acid, I believe it was, had fallen and the place had to be evacuated. That may have been as late as the 1970s or so. And then later there was a overturning of a train track or something or another. So eventually public housing had to be evacuated totally from the Fairfield community itself.
But you don't know when that will be.
Don't know when it is, but they'll get back at us.
Do you want to stay here?
No, not really.
Where will you go?
Well, wherever they put me at, we always meet me and my family.
You don't care where they put you?
Right.
You don't think that the city's ready to evacuate you folks?
No.
Do you know what they're going to do?
It's something that's going to just settle until it just dies on out, unless everybody really push.
And are you going to push?
Oh, yeah. We're going to push.
In the Wagner's Point group, Debbie was on the phone live with the media, and in the background is her daughter going, Mommy, are we going to die? On live TV. I mean, we had an agreement on a deal not very long after that.
Well, I'm glad that they moved out of that. And like I said, now it is an industrial area. And I've met several people that was living in Fairfield, and I met them at different, like the shopping centers or whatever, and they were glad they had moved. But it was a trip.
And I think it's really important that we also make sure that we honor the residents who stood up and stood together, even though people tried to tear them apart on several different occasions, throwing up the potential for division. And they did not take that bait. They, in fact, stood shoulder to shoulder, making hard decisions, listening to information that was frightening and complicated and difficult, And these are regular people. And they changed their history and wrote a story that could change other history.
It is the advocacy of those other communities that will bring about a Fairfield, or to restate a Fairfield in and of itself.
Especially when we're talking about and trying to get policy to match, they're like excluding that completely. They're like, oh, this location doesn't matter because it's not in our census tract because it doesn't have people. And so even on paper, low-key, this community has been erased. Even the way the roads are, it looks like it's only for trucks. It doesn't look like it's welcoming to people. So I would love to see that part of community not blocked off anymore. A lot of those locations have been exposed to a lot of different pollutants, and not only in the air, but also in soil, in the ground, and radioactive things. And so I think that when you are thinking about people living there again, it's going to take a while for that to actually happen, because you're going to have to take a while to actually clean up a lot of what the harms have been done in that community.
Free Your Voice was a group of young scholars at the local Benjamin Franklin High School that, they were just kids, what high schoolers would do normally. But they found out that there was a proposal to build the nation's largest trash incinerator less than a mile away from their school. They couldn't believe it, especially after knowing that there's already so many polluting facilities in that area alone. They were really, in shock to find out that they were planning on building another one on top. And so that kind of where Free Your Voice kind of started. It was a group-led youth group that ultimately shut that proposal down after years of fighting and advocacy. And then they've kind of evolved in a way to attack different issues, other issues that was in the community, and making sure that no communities end up like Fairfield, like Wagner's Point or Hawkins Point, where they were completely pushed away by industry.
When you are creating policies, you cannot exclude Fairfield because that was a community, and it's also less than a mile from Curtis Bay, and so the pollutants and everything is still coming right over.
It is important for all of us to hold our elected officials accountable for the fact that we have expectations that they will take these questions very seriously, and to be building opportunities to hold them accountable, but in ways that allow them to see possibilities they have not seen before to solve these problems, because otherwise we're all living in Fairfield, Wagner's Point.
So, when will we deal with it? I always used to tell my students, you will find a way, because I believe that. And I also think our generation has failed, unfortunately.
A lot of these communities are waterfront communities. They're beautiful locations. There were at one point in time when they had trees, when they had people, when they had laughter, when they was filled with song. And I think that especially those residents that live there, if that's something that they want again, I think that's just something you have to build.